When I was in 6th grade, I was an avid rollerblader. And by avid, I mean mediocre at best. My friends and I would mainly skate through our neighborhood, marveling at how cool we were. But we wouldn't do anything crazy, no half pipes, no ramps, just riding around. And then one glorious day, my mom offered to take me and my friends to the local skate park. I would finally be able to show everyone my true skating potential. Now, when it comes to skating, here's one thing that should be obvious. If you're going to a skate park, you should wear protective gear. But on that day, all I had on was a helmet. No elbow pads, no knee pads. I assumed I was a pro. And 15 minutes into my time there, however, I fell off my skates, landed on my right arm, and broke my elbow. And that was the end of my skating career. But that moment didn't just affect skateboarding. I injured my dominant arm, which made simple activities like writing and eating really difficult. And it was during this time that I discovered a big truth. The decisions I make now can affect my later. Now here's what's interesting about that decision. My choice to only wear a helmet wasn't a great choice, but it also wasn't necessarily a wrong choice. Some choices can easily be labeled as right or wrong, right? Murder? Clearly wrong. Stealing? Wrong. But the reality is that most of our choices in life can't be boiled down into simple right or wrong categories. And that's because most choices in life aren't simple. For example, lying. Now, technically, we know lying is wrong, but what if there's special circumstances? What if your spouse asks for your opinion on their outfit and you think it's not the most flattering look? What do you say? Are you completely honest and tell them exactly what you think? Or what about the authority in our lives? We know God cares about how we treat people in authority, but is it so bad if you take shortcuts on your work that your boss doesn't necessarily love? You're not doing things her way, but it works for you and it saves you a ton of time. Or what if it's a bigger issue than that? What if you have someone in authority at work who's asking you to do something that doesn't seem right? What do you do then? Or what about cheating? Maybe you exaggerate a little or a lot on your tax return. Is it really so bad to avoid paying unnecessary taxes on your hard-earned money? Or what about your choice of friends? Maybe you have that one friend who makes bad decisions, but they're not a bad person. They may not always be the best influence on your behavior, but you've been friends for years and it seems like you're overreacting if you stop spending time with them. Now, there are lots of situations where there's no simple right or wrong answer. In fact, most of life falls somewhere in between. So the question is this: how do you make decisions when the answer isn't obvious and when the way forward isn't clear? And more than that, if what you're doing isn't technically wrong, are these gray areas even a big deal? But here's why this matters. What we do now will affect our later. Our decisions aren't isolated moments. They're connecting us to the future we're creating for ourselves. And any decision we make, no matter how big or small it may seem, is building our future. And sometimes we experience the result of a decision the next day, and sometimes it takes years, but every decision has a natural result. None of our decisions are made in a vacuum. And so for the next several weeks, we're going to talk about how we can all build the best future for ourselves. And no matter what stage of life we're in, this is important. It doesn't change whether we're single or married, whether we have kids, no kids, or kids out of the house. Whether we're early in our career or on the verge of retiring, this principle matters. Our decisions now will affect our later. So how do we make decisions today that will give us the best outcomes both now and later? Well, there's a word that fits exactly what we're talking about, and that word is wisdom. Wisdom isn't the same as being intelligent or knowledgeable. Wisdom can be thought of this way. Wisdom provides clarity in unclear situations. It changes the metric from choosing between right and wrong to choosing what's best. And that's what this series is all about, gaining wisdom that can help us make better decisions now, which can help us experience a better now and a better later. Over the next few weeks, we're going to look at some big ideas about wisdom from the book of Proverbs. And this is fitting since Proverbs is known as a book of wise sayings. In fact, if you've never read the Bible, Proverbs is a great place to start reading because it has a ton of solid advice, whether you're a Christian, not a Christian, or just curious about it all. Much of Proverbs was written by a man named Solomon, who was a king of ancient Israel. Solomon was considered one of the wisest people to ever live. We're going to start by looking at one of the most popular verses from the book of Proverbs, and it says this: "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." Now, this verse isn't talking about a specific situation, but it's a great launching pad for talking about wisdom in general. So let's start from the beginning of the verse. Trust God. This is a phrase we use a lot in church, but it isn't something we necessarily think about that often. What does it mean to trust God? It means to be confident in the one who made everything. It means depending on the character of God. Because if Jesus is the perfect representation of who God is, then we can know and believe that God loves us and can be trusted. So trust God. Trust his understanding. And then don't lean or trust in your understanding. Now, I'll admit that this sounds a little weird. You should trust yourself, right? But here's the thing. You only know what you know. In other words, your perspective is based on your family, your upbringing, where you've lived and who you've known. And no matter how much you've done or where you've been, that's a limited perspective. Now consider God's perspective. He knows everything. He sees everything. He existed before time even began. Then think of yourself as someone who has existed for 30, 40, 50, 60, or 70 years. You may have some experience in life, but can that begin to compare with an eternal God? Who do you think sees life more clearly? Who can see situations and their possible outcomes better? I'm going with God. And this doesn't mean you're not intelligent. It just means you only know what you know. Think of it this way. Would you want the 6th grade version of you making decisions today? Would you want 6th grade you making the decisions in your relationships, in your job, in your finances? No way. Why? Because 6th grade you doesn't have the perspective you have today. They couldn't possibly understand the situations you face now. But God's perspective is limitless. Okay, so trust God with all your heart. Don't trust your own understanding. And then, in all your ways, submit to him. Some translations use acknowledge instead of submit. But regardless of the translation, the big idea is to get God involved in every part of your life. Don't box him into a Sunday morning or a certain time of the week when you worship or just during small group. Invite him into everything. Count on him for everything. Pursue his presence regularly, no matter where you are or what you're doing. And finally, the proverb says, he will make your paths straight. Or as another translation puts it, he will show you which path to take. Now, this isn't a promise that you'll have a carefree life or a problem-free existence. But when you live in tune with who God is and what God is like and how God desires you to live, the wise choices will become more obvious. Think of it this way. Wisdom now can help you miss mistakes later. The truth is that life doesn't always present clear-cut choices. We regularly face questions that ask us to use wisdom. What do we do about an authority we just can't get on board with? How do we handle tensions with a spouse that are negatively affecting our kids? What should you do at work when you're asked to do something that doesn't make you feel comfortable? The answers to questions like these are found by gaining and using wisdom. And that's why Solomon's words here are so profound. To find wisdom and avoid pitfalls on your path, Solomon says to trust God. Seek out his wisdom for your situation and get him involved on your journey. But how do you actually do that? Well, first, start with the Bible. Like we said earlier, Proverbs is a great place to begin gaining wisdom and seeing what God has to say about life's gray areas. Another great place to start reading is the Gospels, the 4 books that record the details of Jesus' time on earth. Those books are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And Jesus' words provide a wealth of wisdom on living a life free of regret. Next, count on your small group. Whether it's the group in this room or your closest group of friends, never underestimate the value other people's perspectives can bring. Someone who's able to read a situation from the outside with a different perspective and who shares your values of faith can add helpful insights into your decision making. So invite others in. And finally, consider pursuing the advice of a professional counselor or someone else older and wiser than you. Remember, perspective is key. So finding someone who has already been in your stage of life and has the value of hindsight can be helpful. Life is complicated. And listen, we're all going to make decisions we regret later. That's just part of being human. But what if we set out to have as few regrets as possible by deciding to pursue wisdom in the gray areas of life? What if we didn't just focus on our now, but thought about our later? What would happen if we made decisions with both now and later in mind? Now, as we leave today, there are 2 questions I want you to think about. What if you did what Proverbs 3:5-6 suggests? What if you actively trusted God and sought wisdom from Scripture and others? What would your future look like 1 year from now, 5 years from now, even 10 years from now, if you made wise decisions now to live better now and live better later? And the second question is this: what if you don't do this? What if you only lean on your own understanding and only make decisions based on your perspective? What could go wrong? What could go right? What could you miss out on? Like the potential choices we've talked about, this choice is up to you. But you owe it to yourself to at least think about how you make decisions, because what you do now will affect your later. And wisdom now can help you miss mistakes later.